Hello, Internet. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology, the best kind of psychology. I am a 10-year user of R for statistical applications, and for the last 7 or 8 years, I've also been using R to author all kinds of different things, academic papers and websites and presentations and technical reports and feedback reports, all kinds of fun stuff. So every week I get together with some compatriots here who are also using R to author things, and we hold these open office hours, hoping to catch other people who might be interested in doing the same thing and maybe just want some minds to bounce ideas off of, or have questions, or just want some ideas for what to do with this stuff. I'm excited today. Today was actually in Minneapolis here, or I'm right on the edge of Minneapolis. It was in the 40s today, and that's tropical. So the Great White North here, we actually had a tropical day in January, and so it was. I don't know. Everyone has a better attitude, I think, when that happens. And it was sunny, nice sunset. It was just wonderful. So I'm in a good mood. Hopefully, some of my compatriots here show up and can share in the good moodiness. So last week, this structure here, and I go over it every week, but the structure is because we our intent is to have these open office hours, and hopefully at some point someone's going to come along and have some questions, and we can collaboratively answer those questions. But in the meantime, we've been covering focal issues and features of primarily Quarto, the authoring platform that we've been primarily using for the last year and a half or so. So, because the way we explore those features is rather open ended and not prescripted at all, we spend the first part of each week recapping what was done in a more, presenting it in a little more linear, digestible format. So, the first thing we'll do tonight is we'll go ahead and recap what happened last week, and then we'll get into this week's topic, which is a continuation of last week's. The other reason I think I'm in a good mood is I like playing with this kind of stuff that we're going to do tonight. So it'll be a lot of fun. One of the reasons I think I'm so excited about using a platform for my analytical procedures as well as documentation and summarizing of things is because of what we're going to do tonight. And so I'm really excited to share that with people, and hopefully other people can take it and also have some excitement and applications from that. So let's actually get into our transition here where we revisit what happened last week.
Well, our heroes have been tricked into making a detour on their way to Mount Flatton to find Bullwinkle's mine. Their nemesis is, who else, that fiend in human form, Boris Badenov.
Ah, but remember, a fiend in need is a fiend indeed.
Now Rocky and Bullwinkle are bouncing along through a top-secret military reservation.
Sure, a lot of billboards on this road. I can't see the view.
Suddenly, Rocky came to a dreadful conclusion.
Bullwinkle, we're in the middle of a minefield.
Hot diggy!
We better stop.
Yeah, let's start digging.
No, Bullwinkle, I mean landmines.
You were expecting water mines? Oh, that's a good one. Water... Boy, they got pretty noisy dirt in these parts.
I've been trying to tell you, a landmine is kind of an underground bomb.
Oh.
And we're surrounded by them.
Then I guess I won't need the old shovel.
Will we see them again next week? Who knows? I have a sneaking suspicion that they'll somehow get out of that. They seem pretty clever, those two. So last week, we stripped everything back from looking at all these features over the course. This is number, 61 was last week. So we've done over a year now of these just weekly YouTube sessions, and we've never repeated the same topic twice. And there's still plenty that we can cover. But I probably was stretching a little bit in terms of features. So little niche features that I don't know, you maybe are appealing to people who have been using these platforms for a while. But Pasquale, one of the people that occasionally pops by here, he had a very good point a few weeks ago, maybe a few months ago at this point. But he said, "Well, how do you even get started with this?" And so last week we kind of presented some ideas for if you're interested in doing this. And I probably spent too much time, but there's plenty of rationale in last week's live stream if you want to go take a look at it. Just forward to the part where I start rambling. Actually, you're going to be forwarding for a while because I think I ramble quite a bit. Um, but last week we talked a little bit about why you might want to do this, and then set up people's personal workstations such that they could get started. And there's one big piece of software that's important to download on your computer in addition to R, as well as the IDE that you want to use. When I say IDE, that's Integrated Development Environment, which is just a fancy word for RStudio or VS Code, or Positron is now another one. If you know, you can use other IDEs as well. We haven't talked about them, but Jupyter, Spider, the Python-oriented ones should work as well. Regardless of what your IDE is, and we're going to stick with the concept of R here as our main analytical platform, you need a separate installation of Quarto. So the links to these slides are posted in the comments as always. And so if you access them, there's a hyperlink here. So if there's hyperlinks on all of these slides. So the first hyperlink here will take you to the Quarto installation page. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and install it on your computer. It doesn't matter where you install it. The authoring software itself will connect with RStudio or whatever your IDE is. And it should be okay just being there. The other part that we spent a little time on, not a lot of time, I think I showed an online markdown editor. There's also, in addition to that sort of editor where you get immediate feedback in terms of what you're typing and what it's going to render like, what it's actually going to look like, Quarto has a help page with their version of Markdown as well, and it mostly shares the same sort of syntactic structure as the more widely known version of Markdown. And again, this is kind of a shortcut language that usually is eventually ported over to an HTML type output, but you can port it to other output types as well. And so it's just ways to format the information that you're trying to present. And this is a great help page. You can also just, if you look at last week's slides, you can also just go to an online Markdown editor, and those are helpful as well if you want some support in terms of how do I get things to look like I want them to look as I'm writing. And then really we proposed two different avenues to get started last week. One is you have an existing project and you want to try to execute that project all within the same platform. And so the historical kind of comparison that we used to that orientation is, in my field of psychology, traditionally researchers or people who are executing a project would type up a summary and a description of that project in a word processor, something like Microsoft Word. You would do your analyses in a different program. It might be R, it might be SPSS, it might be SAS, it might be Literal, it might be Gauss, whatever it is. You're using two different platforms for two different pieces. Well, you don't need to do that. And that's the whole point of having these weekly sessions is a better, and I think I'm just going to say better. You could argue that that's a subjective statement, but I think after 30 years of constructing these workflows and being involved with the broader research process, I think I can say with some maybe even expertise, certainly experience, but also I think maybe some level of expertise that this is an objectively better way to structure your work when it comes to presenting information that has a data analysis component to it, but you also want a description of that. So we talked about two different routes. One route is you have an existing project, and instead of using that traditional method of a separate authoring device and a separate analytical device, Let's try to roll it all into one device, regardless of what you're trying to produce. If you're trying to produce a presentation, you can do it. If you're trying to produce a paper, you can do it. If you're trying to produce a report, you can do it. Um, it's possible to do it. And having your own project is a great way to get started with this. Now, absent having your own project, what we said was the other thing to do is start with a RevealJS presentation. Now, what you're looking at in terms of the slide deck here, this is a RevealJS presentation slide deck. And tonight we're going to talk a little bit about how to create something that looks like this. Now, when I say looks like this, there are little tweaks that over the course of weeks. See, the universe, nature is getting back to me. I said how much I appreciate it today. In the 40s, Great White North. I'm gonna get sunburn. It's gonna like there's no albedo even because the snow is gone. There's no snow. So anyway, the universe is getting back to me now for loving the day so much. Now it's made me sneeze. So maybe pollen is back. I don't know. Or maybe it's this tea. I'm drinking tea. I'm not a big tea fan, but I don't know. Can you see what that is? I put honey in it as well. Yogi? I don't know. Hey, I'm a big cartoon fan. Maybe that means we should. All right, tonight we're going to talk about images. The one of the images that we're going to look for and incorporate somehow is a Yogi the Bear image. Now that this is a Yogi tea. All right, the universe is telling us that, so we're going to do that. So if you're not doing your own project, the other recommendation we have is to construct a RevealJS presentation. And so there's a link on here as well. All these images, they're not that descriptive in terms of the images this week, but they all contain hyperlinks to help pages that describe what these things look like. And the first very high on this hyperlink help page that Quarto put out, the company that publishes Quarto and supports it, they put out, has these navigation buttons here where you can kind of get a sense of some of the capabilities of these presentations. And of course, there's a lot of analytical information here, as you would expect, because most people seek out R when they're interested in doing something with the analytical side of R. You can see little slight tweaks here. It may not be much in terms of excitement on the just on the surface level, but once you get into it, it's really kind of fun. It's really kind of neat. There's some interactivity here, so we should be able to scroll around on these maps, and that's one of the RevealJS HTML type capabilities that you get when you create slides like this. And again, I'm going really quickly through here, and you can access these on your own, but you can get a sense of the types of capabilities that are possible. We've talked about some of these before, like the blackboard and chalkboard capabilities, and we've played with those. When I mentioned that every week we play with a different feature, these are some of the features that we've previously played with. By the way, if I go back to that, it should actually remember the scribbling that we did, even though it's not all that pretty. So that's not going up on anybody's refrigerator, but it's there. Looks like they have 30 or so pages here of this. So you can take a look at that and see some of the capability. Oh my goodness, I didn't realize that that we're going to have to go backwards through all of those to revisit. So so that was last week, and this week is going to be a continuation of last week. So last week we showed how to set up your computer such that you can create your own RevealJS presentation. Today we're going to spice that up. So today we're actually going to take a look at how we can customize that RevealJS presentation to make it kind of your own. These slides that you're looking at, they've over the course of weeks, they've taken on a little flavor of their author, and so there's lots of different stylistic components here. that aren't part of the default slide deck, but are really easy to incorporate. Here, I have some icons here on the title of this particular slide. First thing I think we'll take a look at are fonts. And so as I kind of scroll through here, you can see slightly different types of fonts being rendered. And so that was actually there was a bit of a learning curve on trying to access and have as options different types of fonts in these sorts of presentations. So I'll show you all how I do it, and I think that the way that I do it, I think is probably going to work for most people, for most applications, and it really gives you a lot of flexibility. So you should be able to do all kinds of different customizations to your slide deck through the method that we're going to talk about tonight. We'll also talk about images and how to find an image that you might want to incorporate, the types of images that you want to display, how it's displayed, where it's displayed, the location of it, the magnitude of it in terms of, is it covering the whole screen? Is it just a smaller image? Do I want to make it smaller? Do I want to make it bigger? And that also leads into the third thing that I'm hopeful that we'll get into tonight, which is where does stuff go? Now, the where does stuff go component is kind of been the most challenging when authoring these RevealJS slide decks. But again, I think over the course of now 60 some slides, and it'd be interesting, maybe it's just egotistical or egotistically interesting, but I would be curious to look back at some of the first ones that we did when we started doing these weekly sessions. None of us had done Quartos slide presentations before. I was coming from an R Markdown slide package called Jeringen, and I mean, we've talked about it over the weeks, and it was great and it was fun, and we were fairly comfortable with it. But we said, there's this new authoring platform called Quarto. We should probably develop some familiarity with it, and I'm really curious to see if we were to look back at some of the earlier weeks, what those slide presentations look like relative to these, and whether there's any sort of quality improvement or content improvement. Formatting, I would imagine that the formatting has improved. I would hope so, because that's kind of one of the main things that I think I've learned over the course of these weeks. So we'll talk about all three of these things, and then if anyone happens to kind of stumble across this stream while we're going live and has a question about how to do something else, pop it in the chat and we'll address that. I think we're going to spend one more week on this getting started topic, and that next week will be stuff that maybe we don't get to today or that we don't cover today, as well as sharing. So speaking of sharing again, one of the questions that I had from a loyal viewer, if that loyal viewer is out there viewing, was, well, how do we get other people to access this? And I post these slides every week, and everyone else has access to them. So I think next week we'll take a look at how to share these, maybe some different options for sharing. And then again, any sort of other customization things that we didn't cover today, or that maybe I think of over the course of the next week or so. Okay. And then this is a scary looking screen. I just keep it in here as kind of good practice. I don't write that. That's a simple bit of code that just says, hey, what did your computer look like during this rendering session? And that's helpful for people who are a lot more knowledgeable about the inner workings of kind of under the hood R, and why some things might not be working or rendering quite properly, which happens. That does happen. Okay, so let's do fonts. Let's actually start with fonts. I might leave this open just so I remember what it is that we're hoping to cover. I'm going to exit out of this project. I think last week I mentioned that when you're doing these authoring projects, in terms of workflow, that workflow is going to be most efficient if you work within a project folder. Everything's just there. You don't have to worry about file specifications for things like locating a file. Commonly with us, it's data files. It's just going to look in the folder that is your project folder. That being said, um, because this is rather rudimentary and I don't care what the final product is, I'm not going to work in a project folder here. I'm just going to put this on my desktop. But we'll start with, and again, if you have R in R Studio or any other IDE, the only other thing that you need in order to follow along tonight is Quarto. So follow that, follow the hyperlink that is on, let me pull it up if I can. And I'm just going to go online to pull it up. So follow the hyperlink that is on this slide. So it's the, you know, I, last week one thing we did, we installed the currently newest version of Quarto, the software, and I'm hesitant to say noticing bugs because I don't think anyone from Posit is aware that I'm doing this or we're doing this. Um, but if they were, they would hate to hear someone just say bugs because that's not helpful. It's very generic in terms of a statement. But I have been noticing some ways in which Quarto 1.6, I think it's 1.64, has been acting within RStudio that are a lot different than how 1.4 worked. I missed an entire version. But so anyway, I'm still getting used to this 1.6. There are some differences, and I'm not sure if they're features or bugs quite at this point. But it's the one, two, three, fourth slide in the where to begin slide. And again, if you just follow this Quarto hyperlink, then you will be able to install that software, and then you'll be able to work along with us. So I'm going to go ahead, and I do have Quarto installed 1.6, which I'm kind of starting to regret a little bit. But that's okay because I'm all in on this, and I love what that company is doing, and I will work with bugs. I'm fine doing that. Maybe I'm secretly an entomologist. I thought I was a psychologist, but there might be a little entomologist in me. So that doesn't sound right, does it? Sorry. All right, so we'll just leave the untitled title. We do want the RevealJS presentation, not the Beamer, not the PowerPoint. These are going to be less flexible in terms of some of the tricks that we're going to go over tonight. I think we themed tonight's presentation as spicing things up. So some of the spiciness options are going to look a little different in terms of how we author, how we structure our authoring, if we're intending to publish to a different format. HTML is one of the reasons that we recommended starting out with an HTML presentation deck. Well, one, it's easy to share and other people to access, as you can see if you've accessed our slides over the weeks. But secondly, the tweaking and customization is the easiest across different types of formats. So we're going to go ahead and render this. I'm going to save it on my desktop. Casey, sorry to override you, but one of the early weekly sessions that we had, Casey was popping by more frequently, and so I'm guessing I'm guessing that's probably what that was. Now, by default, you're going to have to navigate these using the keyboard. My slides, you're going to see your mouse wheel is sufficient for navigating. That's not default, so you're going to have to, if you render this, you're going to have to use your computer cursors. If you're on a phone, you should be able to scroll through on the phone. I think that's enabled by default. Okay, so do we call it? Let's call it. If we're gonna do Yogi the Bear, let's call it the Return of Yogi. Or let's make it really kind of gruesome. Yogi's Revenge. And then that'll be good because we can actually, since we're playing with fonts, we can see if maybe we can get a good revenge font in there. I'm going to leave the rest of these default specifications and we'll maybe tweak some of the content as we go. There's Yogi's Revenge. Doesn't look all that, I don't know, doesn't look all that intimidating at this point. One of the things we did talk about last week was themes. And so one very easy tweak that you can do, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we did talk about it last week, but one very easy tweak that you can do is to use one of they're called bootstrap themes, and there's I think 13 or 15 of them that you can apply to these Reveal slide decks. Currently, that'll probably change over the course of different releases of Quarto, but currently it's in the low teens. If you're going to tweak the look of these in the YAML in this front matter bit, you're going to want to hard return and tab over, and then at the end of RevealJS, put a colon, which means I'm going to have more specification here. Another hard return, and it does the tab automatically. I am going to type theme, and then let's actually look for a Quarto RevealJS theme. And we'll probably get a number here. What does that look like? 11. I said 13, then I said 15, and I was wrong both times. So at least it was an odd number in between 10 and 20. So for whatever reason, that makes me feel better. If we're talking about Yogi's Revenge, maybe we'll try Blood. See what happens there. You know, only 11 different themes. That's not a lot of, well, it's really kind of in your face now, isn't it? You can see my 3 bars, my 3 horizontal bars here have gone red. So I'm guessing that's part of the theme. And the themes largely play with font, things like the location of your title. Is it centered? Is it left justified? Is it right justified? And then color schemes as well. So that's frequently what these themes deal with. You could play with other themes if you want. But I think let's try to get some different fonts in here. And so I have a method for that. And I think what we're going to do is just in the slide itself, in the slide deck. Now, in this slide deck, there's a title slide, which is defined within the YAML. And then there's each slide itself is indicated by this second level, what would typically be a second level heading, if this were a document, not a presentation. These first and second level headings are saying, I'm done now. I'm ready for a new slide. So this slide deck should have, in addition to the title slide, it should have 1, 2, 3 different slides. Now, if I do 3 headings on there, that's going to be a new heading within the code slide. So I should still only have 4 slides, including the title here. So title, first slide, second slide, third slide, and there's a way to put numbers on these as well. I don't think we're going to do that tonight because that includes some YAML specifications. So if you go to, it doesn't seem to want to go, so when I say buggy, some of the bugginess, if anyone from Posit ever happens to stumble across this, one of the, I don't want to say buggy again, but to be a little more descriptive, one of the things I've noticed in our studio with this new version of Quarto is my preview pane is acting differently. It's acting differently than it used to. And so one of the things that I just noticed here was difficulty getting to the final slide using those three horizontal lines. Now, the only reason I mention it is because I feel guilty now about saying that I'm still getting used to Quarta 1.6. So that's one feature. So here you see the hey with the three uh, with the three hashtags is not indicating a new slide. It's indicating a header on that slide. If I only use one hashtag, that will be a new slide. And whatever you title it doesn't matter. So maybe we'll just put Yogi here. Yogi's home, I guess. So now we'll have another slide. And because I used a first level header, it's applying a little different styling to it than it is on the kind of normal presentation slides. So the first level header is going to look like the title slide to the entire slide deck. And that's what you're seeing here. And you can override all that as well, but that's what this theme renders as. So let's go ahead and incorporate some fonts. And so the way I'm going to do that, there's a couple of different ways to do it. Typically what I do is I create an extra file that has CSS, Cascading Style Sheet Language. And it's an HTML styling language. And I put a lot of information in there and then I just call it as needed. You don't need to do that. You can also just put that in a chunk, so we can have a CSS chunk. So I'm going to use 3 backticks. All right, Mother Nature. I take everything back. The Great White North, you did not have a wonderful day. Your day is now... No, it was a wonderful day. I feel guilty. Okay. It was a wonderful day, but for whatever reason, I'm sneezing. So we're going to do 3 tick marks, and the tick is your upper leftmost symbol on the keyboard, usually with a tilde also. So it's usually on your number sequence underneath the escape key commonly. But 3 tick marks and then curly brackets. If I just ask RStudio to give me a chunk, sometimes it gives you an option of chunk heading and chunk type. Default one is going to be R. I'm going to change that to CSS. So we're not going to put R code in here as we have below. So I have a R command here. I'm going to say I want CSS in this. And what I've been using for fonts is Google Fonts, and they're fairly easy to get, which is why I've been doing this. Now you can also install fonts on your local computer. I started off doing that when I first started customizing these sorts of products. And then I think I came across somebody who made a very good point, which is, well, if you want to try to render this on someone else's computer, they also need those fonts installed. And installing fonts can actually be a bit of a hassle. As long as you have an internet connection, using this method, you should be able to grab these fonts from the same spot whenever, wherever you're interested. And from any computer, they should render just fine. So I'm going to look for a font that looks interesting. And again, I'm not really worried about whether or not this is on my local computer. Many of these might already be, or fonts that look like them might be on my local computer. Maybe let's look for a script, because that will definitely look different. That will definitely look different than what currently is rendering here in terms of Yogi's Revenge. So, wow, I got a lot of things open, don't I? I'm going to pull from one of my standard CSS files. I'm going to actually pull the command that I use to access these, because I'm going to share it in the comments, and I think it's a good, useful way to access these fonts. And so I'm kind of talking my way as I look here. I'm looking for my weekly CSS file, and I'm going to take this import URL code, And let me try it before I paste it in the comments today. Let's go ahead and just put it in, and we'll make this a little bigger. And go ahead and put it in my CSS chunk. Now, this isn't going to do anything to, this is not the font we want, by the way, but this won't do anything to my slide deck yet because I'm just saying, hey, here's a font that I found that looks like it might be kind of interesting, but it's just there. It's just kind of recognized. If I want to apply this, first of all, let's go ahead and call it what it is. So it's not Parata 1. It's, I have to close out of some of these. It's called Dancing Script. You can just copy that, or if you want, you can type it in. But I'm going to indicate that at the end of my import font command here. And so this is a CSS command that just says I'm interested in this particular font. If I want to use it, I'm going to need to create some CSS. And now you've seen me do this over the weeks. You've seen me use my own name, not out of any sort of vanity, I don't think, but rather because when we get into the practice of customizing and trying to apply different stylings, there are default stylings as well, and so we don't want to conflict a command that we come up with a command that already exists. And so I know that there's no command called culas within Quarto, so that's why you'll see me do that. Another thing, let's not do that. Let's actually just call it dancing, because there's probably not a styling command called dancing. What I want to indicate here, and I don't think tabs make a lot of difference within CSS scripting, but the standard I use is to tab over, and then we're going to say font family, and there is a little feedback that you get within these CSS scriptings in terms of color and slanting, and you'll see that it looks quite a bit different than it does in my R chunks. You do want single or double apostrophes here. I'm going to call it out, and you're going to end that line with a semicolon. Now this is really important for CSS. You're ending the line with a semicolon, and I'm just going to call it exactly the same as what I have on my line 9 specification. It's called dancing script up there. It's called dancing script down here. Now I have a little bit of CSS that we just created called dot dancing. I'm going to go ahead and render that. Again, we haven't asked for it to be applied yet. So my slide deck looks like it did before. Let's see if we can apply it to information in here. Now there's two different ways to apply CSS. You can use fenced divs, which I'm not a huge fan of because those fences just get too much. You can also use what are called bracketed spans. And so we're going to start with a bracketed span. Let's just take Quarto. And the bit that you're interested in applying the font to, use square brackets. And then adjacent to that, in curly brackets, we're going to tell it the styling that we want to apply. The styling that you want to apply is defined here on line 11. It's whatever you call this information in the curly brackets. So now what we're saying is everything in the square brackets, apply this styling to. So now when we render this document, my expectation is that Quarto is going to be rendered not like it is here. Ooh, look at that. The preview is red also. Kind of burgundy, right? I don't know if that's red. But it shouldn't look like that. It should actually look like this. So can we change what this says? I'm not sure. I guess we can. So it should look like this, right? So Quarto versus the new one. So let's re-render that and take a look. And of course it doesn't work. Oh, I'm sorry, it did work. We applied it not at the title level, but underneath the title. So you just got to blow it up a little bit to see. So there's Quarto with that styling. Now that that kind of is not all that noticeable. So there's a few different things we could do. We could put a color in there as well. So color, and again, we're going to need a semicolon. Those semicolons at the end of these CSS lines are really important. It says I'm done. I'm intentionally done. Um, the colors I usually specify with hex codes. And so one hex code that we know is badass. We've been using that. That's kind of a cyanish, yellowish color. Now that should stand out quite a bit more. So if I re-render this, Quarto is now in that color. Now one of the things these different fonts have is they have different relative sizes to each other. We can also change the size here. So size, let me see if I have, and I'm looking off screen. I'm cheating a little bit in terms of some of the other specifications that I've used. But font size, font dash size is the command I'm looking for. And there's different metrics that you can apply. The one that I like the best is EM. EM, it stands for something like enlarge, magnify. That's not exactly what it stands for, but that's essentially what it does. And so I'm looking to take what's currently rendered, and in this particular case, I'm going to make it 3 times as big. Now that's kind of ridiculous. Let's just make it 2 times as big. These don't need to be integers either. You can do 1.2, 1.3, 1.5. You can try to match it to whatever the other text looks like. This applies to titles as well, so we could actually wrap the title. But you see there, it's double the size. In addition to these bracketed spans, you can do these fences. It's at least 3 colons, curly brackets, and then you got to end it. You got to put three colons at the end of it. I don't like these because they just proliferate. You lose track of them. So I tend to use bracketed spans more than fenced divs. But we can apply the same styling now to the entire second slide. So the second slide, other than the title, my expectation is that it's going to be rendered in that badass color script. So let's see if that works. Yeah, there we go. So I'm going to go ahead and put this import command in the chat because I think that's the most important component of it. I guess I can also put the CSS that we created, but really the piece that you want is that import bit. That's really what's going to be most helpful. Now there was a really neat font, now that I think about it, that I love, that was really unique, and it looked like a tree. So they had leaves on it. No, of course I'm not gonna be able to find it. Let me look really quickly through one of my old scripts here to see if I can see what that was. Well, let's do this. So let's actually make Yogi's Revenge scary. So let's look for a scary font, and then we'll move on to images. What time is it? We're running a little out of time, aren't we? There's no scary. These searches aren't great within here, but we want something that's like Halloween-y, seasonal. There we go. Creepster. Oh, here's a bleeding one. Let's try that. No Cipher. Do you want to use that font? No Cipher. So I'm going to just copy that import URL, And instead of dancing script, I'm going to try Nocifer. Nocifer? I haven't used that one before, but it does look kind of scary. ER. So we'll do ER. Nocifer. And then we're going to add a different type of styling here, so we'll call it Nocifer. It's the most descriptive I can think of. The font family now, and single quotes or double quotes don't matter. Capitalization does matter. This is case sensitive, so you're going to want to be careful about that. Should we make it red? Just to be, I don't know, really gruesome, I guess. So here's some reds. We'll do blood red, which looks like this. FF 4 zeros. So let's try that. And now we should be able to, even though this script is underneath my title, we should be able to apply this to the title. So let's just apply it to Revenge. See what that looks like. And again, I said case matter. These font names are case sensitive. However, I'm kind of in the habit of reserving capitalization in my commands and in my scripting. So you'll see lowercase here. But now the expectation is this Revenge should be rendered within this new font that we found, which kind of scary looking font. I think that red's going to be too red, but let's take a look. There we go. It does look scary, doesn't it? Now this is actually a little big, right? It's overplotting. It's coming through onto the second line. So if I want to keep all three of those exclamation points, I'd be tempted to come in here and say font size is a little smaller. So we can go 1.7 M and try it. Now the entire thing should be a little smaller. Oh, I'm sorry. Not 1.7. We want 0.7, right? It's definitely not smaller. So we can go smaller. There we go. So now it's all on one line. And it's scary. All right, so let's get some images in here. So those are fonts. Now images, there's two things to pay attention to with images, especially with a theme like this. So with a theme that we're using where we have this black background, you're going to want to think about whether your image has an existing background or not. So the image types that have transparent backgrounds are usually in a PNG or SVG format. That's been my experience. There are other ones as well, but the ones that tend to work best here are going to be PNG and SVG files. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to look for Yogi the Bear. We'll ask for a transparent background and PNG even. Now, the Google search for these is not great. So you're going to have some that look like what you want them to and some that don't. So I'm just going to grab one here. What I like to do with images is you can store them locally, but you can also just take them from the internet. So I'm going to copy that address. And let's just add it to, I'm going to actually replace this first slide. And we'll just call it, hey there, boo-boo. Bobo. And the image itself, this is consistent across our Markdown, this language that we're using, Markdown. It's exclamation point, square brackets, and then in parentheses, you put the file path to the image. Now, this isn't a great sign that I'm not getting a preview in RStudio, but again, I have a new version of Quarto. I also have a new version of RStudio, so it's possible that that it's not rendering. Okay, it did not like that image, and I'm guessing it has something to do with the encryption. So let's grab a different image. If you really wanted that image, you could download it and then grab it from your computer itself. This looks like it's probably going to be that transparent background that we were interested in. And we should get a sense of it right away. Boy, okay. It really isn't working as well as it typically does here. Honestly, typically there's not this much of an issue with getting an image. And what I'm doing is I'm just looking at these preview panes, I'm right clicking, and then I'm saying copy image address. And see if we can get one that actually renders on preview here. These WebP file types, they don't interact great with what we're trying to do. So these don't always render. So that one's not rendering. We might have chosen the wrong idea with Yogi in terms of getting these images to work. Honestly, it's usually, I know I already said it, but it's usually not this bad. This one should render. It looks like the link itself looks like a fine, like actual link. And so there you see it. We're getting why are we getting an extra? It looks like we're getting an empty. Looks like we're getting an empty slide here. Okay. I'm not exactly sure why that is. Might be because of our CSS. It shouldn't be. But it might be because of that. I'm not going to worry about that right now. So here we see the type of image that has the background showing, and now it's showing through because of the theme that we're using. If we just had a default theme with not that blacked out background, then the image rendering isn't going to look as bad. However, that if you do have a background that you are interested in applying, so we'll stick with blood, you should be able to find an image that conforms to that. And so there's a couple of different things you can do. One, and here's that a little bugginess again. It's not my preview pane is not always being accurate. It's not always being an accurate preview to what the file itself looks like when I pop it out. And so it's one of those little annoyances that, I don't have a lot of experience with Quarto 1.6, but it's something that has happened. So if you want an image that looks a little nicer with this particular theme, you are going to have to hunt and peck a little bit for an actual transparent background Yogi the bear. And so let's go back here and do a quick image search and see if we can find one. The difficulty with this is getting a sense of whether this truly is a PNG, so we need a little more information about this than what we actually are getting using the method that we're using. So if anyone has a better idea of how to kind of see these, I would love to hear about it. Now this is a transparent background PNG. I can see it from the rendering on my preview. And so here you see it looks a little bit nicer. It doesn't have its own background that it's carrying through. So this is going to be a fine image to include regardless of what your actual theme is. Now, I know we're running a little short on time, so one thing that we should talk about before we leave is how to manipulate the location of these images. And so Quarto has a fantastic way to customize what these look like, where they are, the size of them, and it's a .absolute command. And so that .absolute, it takes values of height, width, top, bottom, left, and right. Those are the ones that I deal with. So if we want to move Yogi from the left of the screen here to the right, I can simply say right equals 0, and I believe these are in pixels. So what that's going to do is it's going to put Yogi 0 pixels away from the right side of this screen. And so you see it also did something that we didn't expect, which is resized it. We can go ahead and alter that too. So we can say, no, I like him big. So let's reset the height. And you got to play with these numbers a little bit. So again, I believe it's in pixels, but sometimes the numbers themselves are going to interact with the size of your plotting space a little differently. So we did blow them up, but not quite as big as we wanted to. You see the dimension of the entire picture, even though we didn't specify width. It's keeping the dimensionality of it, which is why that which is one of the reasons why that absolute function is kind of so neat. It's just one of the things that makes it easier to work with. And so here we should have a bigger Yogi. There's really big. He's on the right, which is a good location for him because he looks like he's running. Now we could look for a little puff of dirt here. Maybe we'll just do that. And then we'll leave it at that. So let's look for a puff of dirt transparent background. There are websites that can take an image with a white background and they can make it transparent. Now you won't be able to pull it because you're gonna have to save that somewhere locally. This does not look like what I want it to look like. Puff of, not dirt. What do we want? Puff of smoke? Maybe? It doesn't look great either. I want something like this, but that does not look like the transparent background. Let's take a look here upon preview. So again, we're gonna have exclamation point, square brackets, and then parentheses. Put that image. Yeah, it's coming through, not the background we want. So I don't, puff is maybe not what we want. Trail of smoke. I think that's more like what I was thinking about. I don't know about the transparent background though. We may have a difficult time with this, just in terms of the amount of time that we have here. Sometimes these images, the preview images still have similar images below it. So this is transparent, but it's got some watermarks on it, just so we don't spend the rest of the time monkeying around with this. Let's go ahead. Are you guys still there? Yep, there you are. Let's go ahead and render it on our slide and see what it looks like. Does not look good, but we can take that, we can make it bigger, and we can certainly move it down. So I'm going to move it all the way to the bottom using that absolute command. And it takes negative values as well. So as you're playing with locations, you can move it. If we need to go negative, we can go negative with it. So now it looks like he's got a gastrointestinal issue. We actually want that to be a little lower. So we'll move that to -50. Let's move it left a little bit as well, because it's currently rendering on his belly. Now, I mentioned that Quarta 1.6, the previews aren't necessarily looking like what we want. This preview does look like what we want. So I want to move this down underneath his feet. And again, we're just kind of ignoring the watermark for time purposes. I'm going to move it down, and then I'm also going to move it left. And I'm going to go negative on the left as well. We might need to go quite a bit negative on the left. And we're just kind of eyeballing it here. If you play with this for a while, you'll develop some facility with it. So we're getting closer. I want it a little further left. I want it a little further down. So I'm going to back both those numbers up. roughly 50 pixels or so. And now, oh, I don't want to publish it. We do not want to publish that. Never mind. But that's, so that publish button is one way to publish it. So that's about the right kind of depth. It's a little big, so I'd probably want to shrink that as well. So if we change the width, I would pop that down quite a bit. Now it's going to mess with our bottom and left. And 300 is obviously way too small. I put it way down here. So we probably want 500 or 600 on that one. And again, you can see where this method, if you're a developer, you're not going to spend as much time as we are actually doing this. That's not a bad size. I'm going to move it a little closer to his foot. The bottom is a little tiny bit low. It's not exactly where I wanted it. So I'm going to move it up just a little tiny bit. And what did I say? Oh, we want it further to the right. So let's just put it in at 0 and see where that renders. And then we're getting this empty slide here too. So I'm going to, it looks like what's happening is it's including this CSS. So let's do a, let's do an include and see if that helps, because it's getting a little annoying. There we go. So that got rid of it. That looks pretty good. I think I would blow it up just a little tiny bit, and of course get rid of those watermarks as well. We don't want the watermarks, but now it gives them a little motion on there. Okay, so I wanted to also talk. I guess we talked a little bit about image layout tonight, but I also wanted to talk about the layout of content within these slides, and we are running over from the amount of time that I typically intend to spend on features like this. So I think maybe we'll just call it there for tonight. And then next week we will cover layout. We'll revisit this if anyone has any questions about images and location of images and fonts. But the fonts in particular should be enough to kind of get you going and customizing what your slides actually look like. You can get really, oh, because we said include equals false now. So we would have to do, what would we want to do? Well, there's a command in here that will give us our CSS, but it will ignore it. I guess the easiest thing to do for now, since it's bugging me, is to go ahead and move this down. As I said, I don't usually do CSS in chunks the way that we're doing it here. I usually just call it up in the YAML and off of a different CSS file. But you don't need to do that. So this is another way of dealing with it, is just moving it down in your slide deck. It actually did disappear here, so we don't have to deal with it anymore. But yeah, the fonts themselves should get you enough to really kind of play. I guess one last thing let's do, because I like to do it in my slide presentations. Let's get a slide. Let's get an image that isn't just one on a slide where you can put other content on the slide. So for example, we could still put content to the left of Yogi here. So I can say pick in Nick. And so that will render to the left of Yogi. We can do it. Let's do it in our, what did we call it? Dancing script. And so to the left of Yogi, there should be a little description of picnic. There we go. So in addition to that, we can put, and you'll see me do this in my slides, we can put an image covering the whole background. And let's look for a pretty image, maybe a sunset or something. This looks nice and tropical, doesn't it? I'm gonna try that image address again, and we'll see if we can apply it to one of these uh, one of these pages. Um, Yogi's home. I guess we can again. My preview is looking a little funny. Yogi's home doesn't have anything else in it, so we can try it in here now. Within these titles, or at the level of the title, we can actually give the title some attributes, and the attribute that we want is actually related to an image. We want the background image. I'm going to do a Google search for RevealJS Quarto background image, and we should get on that help slide. We should get, now it might be, here we go, slide background. Here we go, images. So background dash image, and then we have double quotes. So we should be able to, on Yogi's home, just try that background image. I don't want their image. We want our sunset. Where did our sunset go? There it is. So I'm just going to put that URL in here. Again, as long as you have an internet connection, I think. Doggone it. This is going to be another one of those doesn't render right. It just, the URL doesn't look quite right. Oh, it worked. So we can go ahead and put that as the entire background. Now you can see it's not framed the way you might want. So there's some tweaking you can do with framing as well. Let's do one more image on the title slide, because title slides are actually a little bit different. What should we do? What is our title slide? Our title slide is Yogi's Revenge. What's a good image for revenge? Let's just look up revenge and see what happens. Well, there must be a TV show or something called. That's the worst. When you're looking up an image and there's a movie or a TV show or a book or something that's somewhat popular and it just dominates all these images. I don't know. Not a big fan. Here we go. This is brutal. A little voodoo doll. I'm going to copy that image. Now, to get the title slide to show a background image, there's a little bit of tweaking that we're going to need to do. The command is a little different, and it's going to go in our YAML itself. So there should be on the help page, there we go, main title slide background. So here you see a description of it on the slide background section of the RevealJS presentation. Slide information. So instead of just background image, it says data background image. And so that's a little different than our specification. This is going to be the third sneeze, and now I lost access to you guys, so I'm going to, oh, it just went away. Okay, so there's just a data appending that we do on the preview of that. And so data background image, I should be able to just put a hyperlink to it. I'm not going to get a preview in the YAML, and I shouldn't need double quotes there, but we'll come back and check if it doesn't render correctly. It looks like it did not render correctly, so let's take another look. Oh, again, let's pop it out because I'm getting some weird, I shouldn't say weird, but I'm getting some behavior that I'm not expecting to see from my preview. Oh, we forgot title slide attributes, so that's apparently important. So that would explain it. Title attributes, it looks like I need an indent off of that. So let's see what happens here. If your indentations are off in your YAML, you'll usually get an abortion. Pardon the term, but you'll get an abortion of the rendering, um, and so that's good feedback in terms of probably just a indentation issue. So there's our Yogi's Revenge. One of the kind of neat features here on these title slides that I play with that helps the title itself pop, in addition to font that you apply. You can also play with the opacity of these images, and that's something that's actually been useful for me. So there is a data background opacity. This is, again, I think what they're doing is they're taking all of these background image, background size, background opacity options, and they're just appending this data prefix to it, and that's saying this is going to be something that I want to apply on my title slides specifically. So it's acting a little bit different. The command itself is a little bit different, and the way to ask for that's a little bit different. And so opacity ranges from 0 to 1. 1 is going to look exactly like the image itself, and 0, I believe the way it goes, we'll play with it here. We'll just go a really low one, and what that should do is that should blur that more towards the background, and in contrast, it'll make that title itself pop quite a bit more. No, the trade-off is the image is going to be harder to see. So, you might want to play with a moderate level of opacity. It's kind of like playing with the alpha field within graph objects. So if you use a lot of ggplot or Plotly, alpha's a fun thing to play with as well. It's the transparency of the plot images themselves. And so that one looks okay. It's a little easier to see our text now with the opacity set like moderately. Okay, so I think we did fonts, we did some images. I'm sorry, I wanted to get to more images. We just kind of struggled a little bit with finding ones that were valid. Just doing a very quick Google search. So next week we will cover how to play with the layouts. So how to get things where you want them, not just in terms of images, but in terms of content. So for example, how to move this picnic around. If you want that to be rendered on the right or on the left or in the middle or down or up, we'll talk about that. I'm sure we'll revisit images again, because it's hard to get away from images when we're authoring things like slide decks and presentations. But then we'll also talk about sharing. So we'll talk about how to host your slide presentation such that you can share it with other people and other people can access it and get all the same neat RevealJS presentation features that we enjoy when we just get to navigate with it here locally. Okay, thanks for stopping by. If anyone happens and stumbles across this and you have any questions about using R to author, that's why we're here. Go ahead and drop me a note. Put a comment on the video. I get notifications when I see that. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and it would help me in terms of content to cover, because that would give me a little guidance in terms of a direction to go with what types of things to cover. Okay, thanks everybody. Good night.